I'm interested in backing up a bit and to personalize it, and also to just engage in conversation. Do you have a first memory of being enchanted by water?
The Spoon River. I grew up in Illinois by the Spoon River in the Spoon River Valley. And it was close enough that we, it was recreational, but we also did a lot of fishing in the Spoon River, and that was not sport, that was for food. And it's a beautiful river, it's still flowing. There was I was born in a little town, Mequon, and it was named after the Amaquan Indians. There was an Amaquan Indian tribe, and there was still a burial mound right outside of this little town. And as a kid, we would go find, what do you call?
Arrowheads?
Pardon me?
Arrowheads?
Arrowheads, yes, we would find arrowheads in this mound above the Spoon River. We also ice skated on the Spoon River, and the Spoon River Anthology, is quite a famous.
Very famous.
So that's my first thoughts about water, and also that I didn't see the ocean until I think I was my late teens or 20 years old, and it had a profound effect on me. And now I have a place close to the ocean, and it's my most calming, centering place to be.
Anybody else? First impressions? First, it could be a bath, with your mom or your dad. It could be.
I have, sure. Actually, the very first thing that came to mind was rain and being outside in the rain and not needing to go inside. I didn't have that feeling like, oh, it's raining, I better go somewhere else. Like as a very young child, I think, I have that memory of being in the rain and really loving that. I have another memory I thought of when Alan was talking about the Schuylkill River in New Paltz, New York, where I grew up, is very meandering. So it definitely moved through the landscape, not at all in a straight line, and so the effect influences how the roads go. And right across the street from where I grew up, through a field and down a hill was the river, was one part of the river, and one kind of late fall, it just rained and flooded, and the river just flowed over the banks into the cornfield, and then it got really cold and it froze. And then there was this beautiful ice that was on the cornfield that we ice skated on. And I guess I remember that transformation of the water, from the riverbed into the land. That was really kinetic for me, inspirational, enjoyable.
That explains why Leah expects us to rehearse and even perform if it's raining, right? Doesn't make any difference.
Well, it's interesting because we're working on a river, and right before we started, Byron, you were saying that you live on the ocean, so the river is different. In Seattle, the river is not obvious, and we live on a pretty interesting river. Its history, literally, it attracted the settlers to the area, but it quickly became waters that collected pollution and waste over time, and so we have, as so many people think of it, have turned our backs on really looking at it. And if you're able to catch the light or listen to the sound, can you hear the river now? Can you hear the river? Where can you hear the river from?
Well, when you're at the waterworks, the main thing you hear is the Schuylkill Expressway across the river.
And the waterfall.
If you're close enough, you can, and the water's flowing hard enough, you can hear the water, the water flowing over the dam. But my experience of the waterworks is always hearing the traffic and wishing that they hadn't built that expressway through the park.
So it's a soundless water in a way. I'm not trying to put words. Is that a landscape that you experienced, or how, when you first saw it, what struck you about that spot?
Yeah, I think when Alan and Leah brought me there, that was the first impression, that the waterworks overlooks the water. And so from a distance you can see it, and if you go up to the balustrade, you can look down at it, but it's not the prominent sound in the space.
So how is it approaching the music of creating music for a place that brings water, which has associations of sound and light and engagement, into a piece? How did you go about approaching that?
Well, I think, you know, appropriately its meaning is hidden river. So I think there was an impetus to Leah had the idea of actually having the singers and audience go with the flow of the river, downriver, and then bringing them to the river. And so that's how the work is constructed, structurally.
So going with the flow of the river. And did you think about the sound being a component of that while you were working?
Well, it was, I mean, it is a very loud, it's so loud there, but I guess I've been interested in the sounds, the urban sounds, natural, you know, what is the sound of our landscape? What do we block out? What are we receptive to? And what do we see and what do we not see? And I guess part of it too is, you know, the turbine, the technological, the reason that the waterworks is there is because of the condition of the water and how toxic it was and the need to actually have water awareness. So all of those layers and levels of the technological influence on the environment, and I mean the cultural impact. Karen, come on in.
Come on in.
Yay, you're here.
Come in. No, you're in.
Oh, I'm in. Oh, you're in.
Have a seat. Have a seat. Thank you for coming. Thanks.
Karen can talk about the site more, the waterworks, but for me it's not only about it's about the river and the impact and the result of our interaction, human interaction, and kind of these cycles of revealing and then I'm not saying what I mean. What I mean is, you know, that how it was taken advantage of. The river was pretty much taken advantage of and not valued for what its place is in our world. And then the waterworks actually was to clean that technologically, and yet we're still not, you know, I feel like sometimes it's more of a collision, or a collage, you know, the water, the technology, and how we've constructed our urban environment.
So can I bridge to Adam for a second? Adam, can you help us understand how that happened, why it happened, in terms of, you know, the transition from a free-flowing river, which goes way back, to this creation of a structure, a technology? Maybe you could describe that a little bit.
Well, of course, the river originally was as you said, free-flowing. There was, I guess the Native Americans did build weirs to catch fish, the shad and other fish. Right. And then as the city grew up and the wells became polluted, they looked to the Schuylkill River as opposed to the Delaware River for a cleaner water source. And they set up a couple of different versions of steam-powered waterworks, one at Chestnut Street and one at Fairmount, before they decided to build a dam, which of course most people don't think of what the dam did to the river upstream, but that was the first thing that, you can help me, Karen, the first thing that can sort of chain the river. There's the sculpture at Fairmount called Schuylkill Chained, and that's the river dammed and river in the service of man. But it also backed up the water for 6 miles above the dam, created a big pool of water that was used for drinking water. But then you had industry that came along, Manayunk, because part of building the dam was building a canal that went up to the coal country 115 miles upstream, and part of that bringing the coal down here, and part of building that whole navigation system was to have industry along the river. So one of the first places where industry formed was about 6 miles upstream from the intake at the Fairmount Water Works, where they were getting drinking water, was the mills at Manayunk. And I can go on and on and on, but that was the beginning of the pollution of the river. But then there was Fairmount Park, and you want to pick that up?
I think what's interesting is that you know, there's still remnants of the dam, of some of these things that Adam just talked about. Not all the things that we know in the history of the site still there, but the dam is actually a structure that certainly has sort of become iconic, even in, you know, just in photographs, the things that we see just on television, the dam, the buildings themselves. But when you think about that dam, at least what I think about is that here's something that historically helped to provide water to a city and currently does the same thing. I think that there's a good conversation to be had by something that looks relatively innocuous to us, but still creates this freshwater lake that supplies water to half of the people that live in Philadelphia. So it's that freshwater lake where we all see, just last weekend, I guess it was the Dadville Regatta, the race. We're accustomed to seeing those kinds of things on the river, but we're not always accustomed to knowing that that freshwater lake still provides water to our intakes at both our Belmont plant and our Queen Water drinking water plant. That's a huge bit of history that is current and relevant in today.
I'm going to backtrack for a minute and ask you the question that I threw out here,
Okay.
Which was whether, before we go back to history and inspiration, whether you have a first memory of water that you'd like to share. You're on the spot.
We didn't all answer it. So.
No, you don't have to.
Really?
Yeah.
My
We
first memory of water. You mean my truly first, or
Yes, or that you have a.
that really actually helped me to make the decision to join the water department, right? Because it's true. I guess I was about, I don't know. I grew up in a park. You know, our neighborhood. I lived in Cobbs Creek as a young person. So Philadelphia is my town. This is where I was born and raised, and very proud of it. So I grew up in Cobbs Creek, right at the creek, and my parents never had to worry about where I was, where my friends were, because we were always in Cobbs Creek. So my first real connection with water was there, and at that time, because it was a long time ago, the water was what are you laughing at? The water was fast moving, and there were lots of things in it. You could explore, you know, this idea of tadpoles, and we didn't know they were microorganisms then, but they were, you know, little tiny things and macros, and we would just be in the creek all day, every day, until I got a little bit older, and then I realized, get out of the creek, Karen. But the first real introduction was just playing in the creek.
Wonderful. I mean, because, you know, the sense of the engagement has been through what Leah shared and Alan shared, and you, Karen, as well, is this real literal engagement. And yet we juxtapose that with the fact that our water today, we talked about it being soundless, right? You don't really hear the water, you hear the expressway. And that it's also, there's a division, it's hard to access. And I'm not saying that just in the physical mode, but also in the imagination of so many people in the city, that it is, whether it's hidden or invisible. Well, maybe you don't agree with that. Maybe you think it's neither hidden nor invisible.
Well, actually, I mean, since doing this project, I feel, and also talking among, you know, all of us, and we did this earlier, just a private conversation amongst us in the fall when Byron was here for 2 weeks, and we were planting the seeds for this project, or the beginning of it. Karen's passion and enthusiasm really made me think what is the attention that I'm bringing to my relationship to the Schuylkill River as a resident here. And you know, I'm being really honest here. When you said, you know, how you leave work and you drive along the Kelly Drive and you see the river, and yes. I mean, I have that experience too, that feeling of, oh, wow, you know, the river is right here, and we are there is this profound connection. Yeah. But I think I have to say it's really changed since doing this project. My sense of, you know, this is my home, this is Philadelphia, and this is the river, is part of the. I mean, my mind has been changed in that way, which is really wonderful.
Well, that's what water can do. It's transformative. You know, no matter how we sort of approach it, whether it's spiritually or whether it's in recreation, I believe that it changes people. I'm a firm believer in that if you get folks out on the river, you get them to just experience it up close and personal, it changes your relationship. But you have to be introduced to it. So you talked about when we got together some time ago, we all talked about the river. We talked about it together, so I kind of introduced it to you through my eyes. It's like a relationship. I introduce you to my river. You guys get to know each other, right? You start a little relationship on your own. Next thing you know, you fall in like, and then you fall in love.
And that's okay with you if everybody loves your river?
It's okay. Yep. I'm not the jealous type, so yeah, I'm okay with that. Right.
Did you fall in love with the river?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
We took for the first time, I took that riverboat. Byron and I took the riverboat in October. But you go ahead and see.
Yeah, I think as much, I mean, one of the joys of this project is rehearsing by the river. And in October, I had to take the train. So I took it to the 30th Street station and would walk 20 minutes along the river to get to rehearsal. And that was a nice way to come into the space.
And some of your walking experience inspired musical motifs, and that you mentioned. Yeah,
because I not the water, but I heard insects or other things that were in the space. So those,
we had the most amazing experience on Friday with a rehearsal. We saw a whole family of turtles down on the Schuylkill. It was really. Just had to share that. But it was so, I mean, it made us quite quiet. But I mean it, there was one like this, another one, and then there were littler ones, and then there was one like this. And then the big one went over and helped the little, they were teaching them to swim almost. It was very sweet, and it was very unexpected in my sense of the Schuylkill River and kind of its state. So it's just nice that.
You know, I think that's where I would see disconnect with people that visit the Fairmount Water Works and visit the river. They don't know really what to expect. They just see this thing that moves about, and they don't know that there are 50 different species of fish that live in the Schuylkill. They don't know that there's a family of turtles that hang out on a big log, you know, and just sort of sun themselves. They don't know about the diversity of life in the river. I mean, if we can figure out a way to get people closer to the river, spend more time, like with your production, you know, spend more time at the river, then you would see those things and you'd come away thinking about it differently.
So people are, as I referenced in the first part, you know, the river has that sense of being in flux and being dynamic, being undependable. They've seen it flood. You look up from the river bridges and you look down in flood times and you know. So there is this other relationship that we have in present day, because you can access it. In the past, you would not have wanted to go along its banks. And there were not banks to go on. The industrial waste was really too profound. Well, isn't it true that Aiken's images, Adam, were a bit mythologized, if you will?
Any painter will take whatever they want out of the picture. And certainly you can't smell the river in the pictures. And I'm not, you know, it depends on, or you can't see the color. The color of the water would have been the reflection of the sky, but the color of the water could have been running black if the cold waste is washing down the river, or could have been, you know, just full of chemicals or full of sewage. And, you know, by the 1870s, the 1880s, the river was very polluted, and that's part of why people, I think as the older generation who remembers the pollution of the Schuylkill River is slowly, you know, aging and dying off, I think younger people will be much more able to relate to the river in a new way, because there's still people alive who remember the river being terribly polluted. Even in our relationship with the river, you know, the 50 fish, I think, or whatever, however many fish, that number gets larger every year. Where 50 years ago, there were probably very few fish other than big catfish that can live in anything. living in the river. And farther upstream in the river, there were no fish from the acid mine drainage and things like that. So one of the interesting things that I've found is just not looking at the river as it flows through the city, but thinking of the entire watershed. You know, Karen and I on separate trips last year had the chance to go up to the headwaters of the Schuylkill River with someone who knows them very well, and just see that the abuse of the river was not just in Philadelphia, in the urban areas. It was out in the coal fields. It was the strip mining that was done and the acid mine drainage that still comes out of these abandoned mines and pollutes the river right from almost its very source. So it's a challenge to try to change that mindset. But I think working with a lot of young people, as the Water Works Interpretive Center does, I know that's not what we call it anymore, but right. Sorry. but I think that's helping to change people's view of the river from something that might look pretty to drive along to actually being something that maybe you can get out in a kayak on, or maybe you can actually swim in if you're a triathlete, if you catch the right day. So.
Right. I'm curious, Alan, just as a question for you. This is you've done outside productions with Leah before and inside productions. What is it like with all of the ambient sound to deal with a very large choir? This
is actually the first outdoor collaboration that we've had. And in fact, the first performance for Mendelssohn Club that, you know, other than Man Center or something like that, that is outdoors. And that was my biggest concern. You know, will this be amplified and make an ugly amplified sound, or what instruments will we have so that we can be heard and all of that? And of course we picked the right composer. He had a solution or an idea that I had not thought of at all, and that was that we're not going to compete, that is the musicians, the singers are not going to compete with the sounds of the city and the river and the Schuylkill, but we're going to become part of that sound. And once you accept that with an open mind, that you're, for instance, with an open mind that you're not going to hear every note probably, right? Like if you're going to go hear a Beethoven symphony, you want the acoustics to be perfect, you want to be able to hear. That's not the point here, you know. So that was a great relief. And then Byron, who has worked in water and composed using water, obviously very sensitive to what he said, that we in fact do become part of the flow of the river, part of the sound of the river, and the way the audience, we hope, the way the audience will move around the performance, they will hear what they're listening for. But they'll all hear a different performance depending on where they are in the big space.
Which is also a beautiful reflection on how we experience the river, since it's a very individual association that we have. We can all fall in love with it, but for very different reasons, right. Yeah? Byron, what is it to compose in the water? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
Did I compose in the water?
With performers in the water.
Oh, yeah. I've had performances where performers are in the water or playing the water. I think fairly early on we knew that performers wouldn't be in the river for this. Yeah, you know, we checked out some of the fountains, but so they're by the trees and in the gazebo and near the river in the Grand Plaza in different spaces. I think a lot of it was in October, along with rehearsals, meeting with Karen and Adam and some other folks, and really getting, you know, the history of the place. And for me, it was because in those early rehearsals we were singing, we were making vocal sounds, but there was no text, right? And so a lot of it was to figure out what are the lyrics for this work, and how can we honor the waterworks and kind of the historical importance, and also what it can mean now for people. So I wasn't composing in the water so much as thinking about the venue deeply and the relationship with the river.
So text and selection, that's something that was, you picked up from these conversations and Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The text is all 18th and 19th century text written in Philadelphia about the waterworks, or about the river.
Byron did the libretto. I mean, he did this wonderful research, found all of these wonderful poems and historic writings, and then took phrases. I don't know why I'm telling them what you did. You could tell them, but took specific phrases that really highlight the whole feeling of, say, a whole poem or a whole article or whatever, and used those words in, I would call it a cell-like way, so that singers have a choice. They may do a central text, one line or one word, and then they have a choice to go to a text like this. So of course that creates a little bit of a cacophony, but at the same time, if you're an audience person standing close to 20 singers that are in a circle here, the people closest to you, the singers that are closest to you, you hear their words as you move, as either the dancers or the singers move, or the audience moves, you're in a different place to hear a different text. I think it's brilliant, the libretto, the way he did the libretto. Because to hear a whole poem, to try to set a whole poem so that you're understanding every word of it, it wouldn't work in the space, obviously. But this way you can imagine so much because you hear the right words. You know, you hear flood, you hear twilight, you hear moon. You know, just that enough sets up a whole artistic sound field.
So interesting that the collaboration itself, we were talking just before we started the program, and Ellen, you raised a question. Would you raise that to Leah, or do you want me to be the prompt here about how this collaboration?
No, because I wasn't in on the early rehearsals, which have gone on for almost a year now, and those rehearsals have singers, and we've had wonderful collaborations. I love Leah, and I love the way she works, and we've had these wonderful collaborations. But in this one, there were several singers, not many, 4 or 5 singers, who were with the dancers from the beginning. And they were kind of developing, Leah was guiding them to develop a language that would be a little bit more on equal footing with the singer and the dancer. I mean, we've done, in most of our collaborations, it is the dancers that are taking command of the visual, like 90% of it. And then the singers, because you have this big kind of amorphous group of singers, would have a lesser role. But in this, we have a greater role. And so my question was, now I remember, my question was, how was that different for you? And maybe Byron was there for some of those rehearsals too, that you actually had singers helping you make the decision of how this piece is going to be formed.
It totally influenced the structure, the feeling of the progression. I mean, I had thought about the flow, but really the first thought I had about this project was, wouldn't it be wonderful to have this large group of singers and audience and dancers flow kind of as one group down the river? And the feeling like, rather than there's different roles, the singers and the dancers and the audience, that there is a sense of this interchange and spatially, and then also in terms of the movement generation. It's been, I guess there's a range of processes. First, just thinking about movement and sound, and how the relationship between movement and sound and movement and singing, and what can happen there. And we did that, excuse me, in October. So wonderful to work with the singers and the dancers. Byron was here together. And So I've been thinking about that a lot. I did a research last year with singers and dancers. So kind of teasing out that sense of listening to movement and almost seeing, or the tactile sense of sound, and that, you know, continuum or the dimensions within that, metaphor for water maybe. But, and so the conversation with Byron is so enriched because of your approach to composition, musical composition. It's not linear, it's not narrative, but it can be. I know you do narrative work, but allowing that influence of all the performers and all of the medium, the movement, sound, medium, and space also. So it's been I mean, it's just wonderful to be able to have these wonderful collaborations that have each of them taken us to, I feel like, to a new level,
right,
or a new edge. And really to have the chorus outside, on site, is a really new edge, I would say.
And the audience participation, in the sense that the audience, we hope, will move in a certain way, and they'll be guided to move in a certain way.
And there's times when the audience and the chorus really are, you know, they're all kind of mixing together. So.
Before I open it up to questions from the audience, I do have to look at the name, the title that you've chosen for the piece. And I think Adam had something to do with that. Is that right? I remember meeting with you in October. Maybe I'm wrong, but tell me, how did you come to this title of the piece?
I think I really like that. I mean, the whole reason the waterworks there is there because of the turbine that pumped the water up, and the physical forces needed to just that. I mean, we live in an industrial city, so that aspect of things. And I like also the tension and contrast between something mechanical and then the flow of water. So I really liked that title, and I know Byron actually was not as interested in that title. So
I wanted it to be a Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water." But I thought we can have the title Turbine, and
it can be like water.
You could have the chorus be like water.
it's so wonderful to collaborate with you, Byron.
Oh.
You're so open, but. And I mean, honestly, there are movement ideas that came from a more mechanical and the physics, and also the sense of a mechanism for some actually the way that things have developed and how inspired I've been by the music and the text. You know, things are always shifting, but you know, I feel like it refers to something that we don't see, but is so crucial to why the place is there.
See, my view as a historian, I say, well, turbine is fine, but before there were turbines, there were water wheels, and before there were water wheels, there were steam engines that were pumping the water too. So it's like,
yeah.
It's what I was, as a historian who deals in footnotes and documenting facts and things, I'm very curious to see how the facts were interpreted, and probably will feel more emotion hearing and seeing this piece than I do reading most of the things I read about the waterworks. So I'm just curious to see how it all plays out.
I thought of Adam because I remember seeing you right after you met with him, and you were holding a gear or something.
Talk about the gears.
And you were so excited, and I had thought that that's maybe where the name had come from. But
No, I think she did have the name before she met me.
I guess from just the historic development and what a turbine does, and it's the force of moving water through in a certain direction, and the functionality, you know, how it went up. The reservoir was where the art museum was. The interplay with gravity and function and mechanics, and again, that, you know, it's funny that you're on that Grand Plaza and that's what's going on underneath. And just the fact that the waterworks was designed as a tourist destination, but also as a functional place, and I mean the function of the technology right by the river. But so we had this wonderful meeting with Adam in his office at the water department, and many wonderful documents, including music from 18-something, the Fairmount quadrille, and music and the square dance that happened, lots of wonderful things that you have, resources. And then there was a beautiful wooden object on the floor, a round kind of wheel, and it was so beautiful. So we asked about that.
Yeah, I showed them the wooden. Are you using those in the?
We are.
I showed them this thing. After showing them all the documents, we have 25,000 pictures and documents cataloged and all of these things. And so what they were interested in more than anything was this wooden wooden model of a gear wheel. It was some kind of wheel, some part of an engine. Every little piece of an engine that was cast had to be a model of it, and then you would cast it in various ways and get your cast iron or your steel piece. And so after they got so excited over this this wheel, and I could picture, you know, I think I even did something like that. I sort of said, well, you could take this and you could sort of go like, you know, I'm not a choreographer, obviously, but I do have some imagination. So they insisted that I made the mistake of telling them, well, we have about 5,000 of these things like this down at the sewage treatment plant in a storage area. So we spent a whole better part of a day down there in this horribly dirty place with these horribly dirty things, and they picked out about, I don't know, I don't know how many you're going to end up using, but we picked out about 50 or 60 different things of different sizes, and brought them to my house and cleaned them in the basement. And so of all the, you know, all the factual things, all the very literal things that literally describe, the thing that was the most inspiring, I think, were these things that I had neglected, and basically the water department had neglected them. I'm surprised they still exist. They could have easily been put in a landfill, you know, 50 years ago. But and I think, Byron, you even took some text off one of these things, because they all have little labels on them, which I like because they're labeled with the date and all of that. But,
so there is something to that of recognizing, and maybe Karen, you can speak to this, the whole sense of, you mentioned that the waterworks was built as a tourist attraction. Actually, I think there's a different sensibility about a public building, about a public works building, and that it was designed for beauty in terms of bringing beauty to the community, which is contestably done today, right? You know, we could say maybe it's not as given the same attention, but at the time, and Karen, maybe you could give us just a background on how that decision was made and its popularity.
Yeah, it's funny to me as we approach our mayoral race, you know, and the election is not too far away. It actually was a decision made by the Select and Common Council that there was a watering committee, and a watering committee made the selection of identifying an architect and engineer that had skill in designing this type of building, that didn't just want a building that you and I might see as a substation nowadays, it's just a brick building, but knew that they wanted to celebrate the technology and celebrate this grand city, although it had sort of been bypassed as the capital and wasn't as, you know, popular anymore as, say, New York, but it still was a grand city and wanted that to be an attraction for the city, and made a conscious decision to build a building, a set of buildings that would actually do that. I mean, we don't really have that kind of decision making now. In fact, it feels like it's the polar opposite. We want to tear down these beautiful things. They wanted to build it up. It was something to marvel. It was something to be proud of, and you build things of beauty and showcase them. You want to show them off.
And people came. Tell me about it was the most visited site, more than Niagara Falls? What is, I mean, you have the statistics.
I know, we fight over that. I think I think what we like to say is that it was as popular as Niagara Falls, but probably not visited as much as Niagara Falls. But A close second.
I have to keep these people honest. So. I'm the one with the footnotes. If they say something, I have to go scramble around and try to find out something that.
I always look over at you when I start talking. I was like, okay, am I getting the face?
But it was well visited. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, and it was especially after they built the dam and after they put the water wheels in. The steam engines were unreliable. They actually exploded a couple of times, killed 3 men. But the water wheels were actually quiet, talking about quiet. They operated quietly. The turbines were probably a little bit more industrial, but the water wheels that they had before them, 8 water wheels, roughly 15 feet in diameter and 15 feet across, these monstrous things that took the water of the river, created this energy that ran the pumps that then pumped the water up into the reservoirs that then flowed by gravity into the city. So where was I going with that? But it was after that where the technology became accessible and safe and sort of benign in a way that people really flocked to the site after 1822 when the dam was built and the water wheels were put in.
it's really amazing to think about that in terms of, again, how we relate to the river and what draws us there, yeah? It's a very different sensibility, I think, that we're trying to reignite today, respark, especially with programs such as Turbine and what the Waterworks does and all the various efforts to draw people to engage with the waterways in some way, not just to look at it as you're driving home or on the train. Do you have questions for each other? What burning question?
When's the performance?
June 27th and 28th. Okay, good. Yeah, we got that in. Do you have questions to ask, burning questions? Or not burning questions?
I'm curious how maybe this process, because just how it's different for you since we started together working with movement, and I know you have a lot of movement in your background. What has been different in terms of the compositional process, or even the layers of the site?
Yeah, I mean we're in the midst of it, so I'm speaking kind of in the middle of it, but I think we're learning a lot in the rehearsal process, being on site. I mean placement. Yeah.
I couldn't answer because I'm too in the middle of it.
Yeah, so I think that's. Yeah. What?
I would say that it's just interesting and challenging for the singers. We have 2 singers right here. That it's not the kind of score, and I don't think any of our collaborations have been. It's not the kind of score where you get the score, and that's it. You know, and that's what singers really like. Give me the score and tell me exactly how to do it, right? But this is a process of learning and changing and trying things and then changing. And it's true with the music too. The singers, of course, they hear a different piece also every time we rehearse because of the fact that there is this aleatoric possibility of making a choice of the direction and you're going in the music and that kind of thing. So it's it's just so different. The whole rehearsal procedure is different, and at this point, I mean, we were at one point just like 2 rehearsals from performance. Now we are farther away from performance, but you know, we have a ways to go before we could say this is the piece. Yeah.
What would you have done if you were what would you have done then if you were 2 rehearsals away rather than a month and a half away?
Probably, well, Leah would make decisions faster.
Thanks.
We wouldn't be able to have so many trials. Right? But no, we did say, Leah said something about that, and it really is true. If we had our performance as originally planned, which would have been this
Saturday
and Sunday, we would have done that. We absolutely would have done that and had the decisions made, and it would have been a performance. This, in a way, is good. It gives us more time to reflect on what's happened already, and unfortunately, we lost some singers because of the date change, so our large group is not as large. And there is something that in all of our collaborations and with the commissions that I've been interested in, and that is for a large chorus, because that's what I have been conducting, and that's what we are. So, but in fact, I think this certainly, we're maybe down to 45, 50 singers, 54 singers now, which is still, you know, that's a lot. But when you put it in this like acres of stage, it's considerably smaller. But the singers are wonderful. The singers come to this with a spirit that I can't, you know, say for all of them, but I see a lot of almost childlike behavior. That they're there, they're having fun, the river is there. The other night, a wonderful thing happened to one of the 4 groups we started, and we're in 4 different groups, and one of the groups is down right by the river, and there was a family down there. I think they were fishing, maybe, but there was a little guy about this big who started dancing with us, singing with us. I mean, it was just a wonderful thing. That it'd be nice even if that kind of thing happened during the performance. Last night at the end of rehearsal, suddenly a bagpipe player started playing up on the top of the hill. It was good, wasn't it? It sounded good.
You can get his card for the performance, right?
I want to also acknowledge the singers and their courage and openness, and the dancers. Jermaine Ingram is here. Just both the balance of how difficult and challenging the rehearsal process is, with the spirit of the work, which, you know, that is really true for all of us. You know, the excitement about the space, the place, the creative creation, the artistry, and people are just doing so well balancing that. So I feel really grateful to the singers and the dancers.
I think being in the midst of rehearsal, one thing, because as composer, you know, I finished the draft score in February and sent it along, and rehearsal started in mid-February, and now I've been here 2-3 weeks. But it's being reminded what is actually in place. And so there are a lot of water metaphors that inform the work that I'm remembering, right? And so those, when Alan was talking about the aleatoric things, I was thinking of H2O, right? And those molecules and how molecules come together. I was thinking very much, and I think this is one of the challenges, and with each successive rehearsal it's becoming closer, are, you know, individuals as drops of water that then come together, right, as a body of water, and then when they separate and when they come back. So I was thinking of a lot of those things that happened, I think, in rehearsal naturally with a small group, and then putting that in the composition, and then being reminded, oh yeah, that's actually why this is a certain way. Thinking about text too, when it's individual words versus when it's a song that leads to a different section, right? And so there's flow and there's stillness, which is both in that site as well. So I think, you know, yeah, that being in the midst of it and being able to reflect.
So we heard that Leah is still evolving the piece. Are you evolving the piece as well?
I'm clarifying things, yeah, and so, you know, we meet and yeah, so we're clear.
It's this wonderful dynamic process all the way through, yeah, which is pretty incredible in terms of a collaboration, yeah.
The discovery, for instance, Leah has talked about, and Byron, about this, we're actually using bowls of water, and this is where, I mean, there are water sounds, a couple of different kinds of water sounds, the difference between doing this to the water and slapping the water. This all happens during a scene called Flood. And, you know, I heard about this. I mean, I've heard them discuss it and everything. But then to actually have 20 or 30, maybe 30, 35 people holding these bowls, making this sound at the edge of the river at twilight, it's like, you know, magic, just what the words turn into magic.
Well, the magic I'm going to now open to the audience that's here. Does anybody have questions they'd like to pose to anybody who's sitting
I
here?
have one question. You were talking about the ambient noise there earlier on. I was just wondering, does the Schuylkill Expressway have a tone? I mean, is it a C sharp? Likewise, is there a consistent sort of background tone? Is it likewise, I guess, the waterfalls?
That is a good question. I'm not sure that the expressway does so much, but there is a train. There's a train now, 2 different evening rehearsals that has gone by and that train has a pitch. Yeah. And so yeah, so that's something to deal with if we're trying to find pitches and we're hearing from, you know, natural other pitches too.
Jermaine.
Yeah. We dancers and singers have had several months to attune ourselves to the material and to the environment. For probably most of the audience that shows up, this is going to be a very new experience. So I was wondering whether you've thought about how there can be this sort of accretion of sensitivity and intelligence during the course of the hour so that this will take place, and what lasting impact you want this piece to have on the audience in terms of not just their understanding of the history of the waterworks and its relationship to the city, but just how they relate to the environment, you know, regardless of where they are, whether it's on a river or on a city street or wherever.
Well, great question. Last year, my dance company invited 7 singers and 7 dancers. We did research with composer Pauline Oliveros in her deep listening practice, finding this continuum of sound and movement in the body, in the voice as one. And with this practice of deep listening and where is our attention? How does our attention inform our understanding and experience of our environment and ourselves and others? And I know Byron is a listener, a deep listener. My interest is that creating the opportunity for the audience to listen more deeply to the place, the space, and not only through what we are creating, but actually just being there, in walking through the trees, walking out, seeing the river, maybe, and because of the sonic score, maybe their memory of that river, the river is, or their experience of the river is influenced. That's a general answer. And I do think I've thought a lot about the very beginning of the piece and what you set up for audience. How does an audience enter a performance, a site-specific performance, and particularly this one? And we're still in conversation about that. You know, what works when you have such a big audience? I mean, the turnout for this will be quite significant. Also, so how do you handle that number of people in this space without the audience being aware that they're part of an audience, and more than they are aware of their experience of the work? So, of course, we'll learn most when we have an audience, and it would be great to, you know, have the audience and then go back and work some more, most likely. But that's all right. We know we're anticipating that. We'll have some open rehearsals. And then there's also this leap of faith, of trust, of because of the design and the structure and that there's a sense that the audience is really invited in and is kind of buoyed by this flow, sonic movement flow. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about spending time in a place, and for me, the first audience are always the performers, and so how lucky it is that we get to sing outside at sunset during rehearsals, and people who are there to fish with their family, or who are bicycling past or running past or walking past. There was a beautiful moment during Loved by Stars at rehearsal last night where there was a couple embracing, and they were and listening, and they were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And there were kids at the end who were like, what is this? Why are you all singing? And so, it's really finding that, like, oh gosh, we get to spend time here, and we get to sing, and we get to move, and the audience gets to come along with us, and maybe some people will hum along, who knows? But it's allowing that time, because oftentimes I think, parks and so forth, they don't be, it's like, there's a lake in Seattle called Green Lake, and 5 a.m. people fishing are there, but then 6:30 a.m. the lake transforms, and it's everyone like, power walking and running, and it's like, whoa, what just happened? And so in a sense, there's, I think, a bit of reclaiming this as a promenade, right? I mean, these wonderful historic photos of people all gussied up, and the Fairmount quadrilles, thinking of people dancing at the site. So it's in a sense like letting people be there in this new context.
Yeah, I think that people that come that are used to site-specific work will have a little advantage that they maybe can relax and enjoy it more. I think people who, say, are a regular Philly orchestra audience and they come expecting a certain kind of thing, I hope that they won't be alarmed, like, oh, I must be missing, I must be missing something because I'm not in that, in the best place. If I were over there, I could hear more, or something like that. So it's kind of a spirit that people will bring with them, and maybe we can also influence that spirit, so once they arrive, they can have the same feeling as if, when you're visiting a foreign city and you come upon a processional or something, and think, oh my God, I'm so happy I'm right here, right now, to hear that, see it.
The act of surprise. What a great question, Jermaine. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'd just like to ask Leah, I'm under the impression that the dancers we're working with, I'm a singer, I'm under the impression that the dancers have also choreographed sections of this.
Yeah.
Which is really amazing and wonderful for us, because we get that kind of flavor.
Right, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So I was thinking of this before, and about how much my choreographic process is integrating everything, the space, the place, the people, and the dancers are, I'm interested in their response to place and space and text. And early rehearsals, we all generated, if we had more time, I would have worked with the singers to let singers actually generate and be the creators. Did we do any of that?
Maybe with the group that happened, the year-long group.
Yeah. So the dancers have created and responded to the text and the place. So there's I feel like it creates a more integrated language rather than only my language. And maybe that's something that I appreciate about the score. There's so much choice. There's so much what is that word? When you get to choose what you're doing, you're not actually trying to follow the directions. So I'm interested in that choreographically also.
Do you have questions for each other again?
Well,
One more? Oh, wait, Jermaine also has one. Sorry.
Going back to whose comment was probably a combination of Alan and Byron's, this notion of sort of yielding yielding to the environment and allowing the environment to shape the composition. And so I was just wondering whether there were what other things might you have let go of as you yielded to the voices of the space?
I also think that, I'm sorry that I'm answering for you. Well, I think it's, there's so many layers that I so appreciate from our research and conversation in that you actually are bringing very specifically to the space. I feel like both are happening, but I'm interested in how you would answer this. What are you yielding to? But just the inspiration for the text, the range of people's voices that you integrated in, that is a listening to history as much as the place. So I actually feel like there's a nice balance there, but I'm interested in what your answer is, without not answering for you.
I would just say on a very practical level, and I don't think you're talking about limitations, but I'm thinking about it as limitations of time. Because there's something about the process that is so creatively satisfying that I have the feeling I'd just like for that to go on. But then there is this thing called performance, and so at some point you have the limitation of, okay, you have so much time, and you do want things organized enough that they're making a performance. Did that have anything to do with your question?
Maybe a little bit. No, but I mean, there is something about a performance that sort of sharpens the attention.
Yeah.
And,
right.
But I guess you were. I can't remember what it was you were talking about. Well, Alan, you were talking about how you weren't going to try to control the space with amplification or whatever, and you were going to allow the space to be the space. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just, I have this question about in what other ways does the composition, does the development of the performance yield to the environment, yield to the history, yield to the factors that converge in this effort?
Yeah, I think part of the yielding, because I was in a really challenged place in November, December. There was a lot of text that I found. I'm like, oh, this would be so great, because they were like personal discoveries I had made, like the poetry of Elizabeth Chandler, who is an abolitionist. And I started, I think, with 6 poems. And I mean, there's no way that the chorus would memorize and be able to sing through that. And so I had to figure out a way to acknowledge that I really admired this writing, who I didn't know anything about, and could include it, but that maybe it would spark someone else to do the research. And so I think there was a lot of letting go of, oh my gosh, I want to include this and I want to include that, and letting it be open. And I think that's where the water metaphors really helped, like thinking, okay, take a step back, because I'm not, I think I sent you 26 pages of text and you were like, it needs to be memorized. And I'm like, I know, and so, yeah, so, stepping back and thinking, oh, well, maybe there's another way to structure the piece. Maybe it's water molecules, and maybe it's this, and going abstract, and then coming back to the literal, right, which lyrics always are for me. And then thinking, oh, maybe the lyrics start to come apart, and then they come back together. And yeah, it's really setting up the audience's expectations. And from the get-go, like, how is a listener listening to something that takes them out of the concert hall, right? That takes them out of the expectation of a Philadelphia orchestra with choir concert into the Fairmount Water Works.
There's actually it might be interesting to know that there is a big musical and scenic question mark, even at this late date, and that is that Leah had the idea a long time ago of a boat approaching the area of the waterworks, and that would be the connection, the actual connection of the land to the water. You should be saying this, but and that there would be a singer in the boat, and that this beautiful final melody would be sung by the singer in the water and a singer on land, and that way it's sort of connected. And first of all, the whole boat, the problem of getting a boat is enormous, and we're still hoping to have an experiment, that is to get a boat and to try it and see how it would work as an ending. We have another ending that is very, very beautiful, the one that we're rehearsing right now. I mean, when the singers
we might do that ending anyway.
Yeah, we would do that anyway, whether or not there's
a boat or not.
There is a
Don't
boat.
give it away.
Spoiler alert, right.
You also have to worry about the tide with the boat too.
Yeah.
And if it's a flood, if we get a rainstorm and there's
lots of considerations with a boat. If it goes over the falls.
We're not gonna even bring that into the karma here. Have you gone out to hear any of the rehearsals?
You know, I've tried not to because I want to be part of the audience. You know, there's so much that I know have been challenges, and I don't bring the challenges, right? So I also just want the performers to feel very comfortable and not feel like I'm there because of some crazy issue. So no, I'm just going to wait until June, right? And be surprised by everybody else, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that this is going to become part of the history of the site. Yeah. So then I can document it and put it in my archives. I'll take the videos and we'll download them off of YouTube and all of that. And it'll all become part of the history. So,
Okay.
So I'll get you in there somehow, even if it's all wrong. So.
You're in good hands, I think. You're in good hands. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we'll thank everybody, the audience, for coming. Thank you, Alan, Byron, Leah, Adam, and Karen, especially for coming and sharing this time and conversation. And it needs not be said, but we'll see everybody on the 27th and 28th. If it, as I'm doing, I would encourage everybody to come both nights because there'll be different performances. And if there are open rehearsals, take advantage of that opportunity as well. So I encourage everybody to try and get a chance to see it so you can become part of history. Thank you.
Well, thank you
for coming.